All right, so let me briefly introduce myself. My name is Dimiter Ialnazov, and I'm a professor at GSAIS or Shishukan. I'm originally an economist, and quite a long time I have done research on market economy transition in Eastern Europe, myself being from Bulgaria, Eastern European country. And now my topic is about renewable energy in developing countries. And I'm also the head of the organizing committee, so this conference today is a product of more than half a year of preparation and lots of efforts. And finally, it's like a little baby that's being raised, and finally we see the birth of our baby today. So it's really happy occasion for the organizers too. So I would like to, because we don't have much time for this final discussion, basically to try to discuss and summarize kind of the main ideas, or let's say main findings of this symposium. And this means going back to the roots, to the beginning. And so I'll just give a couple of questions to all of you, all speakers, and then open the discussion to the floor for questions from the audience. So my questions are very basic, related to the main goal of the symposium. So when we started planning the symposium with Professor Deroche and Professor Isobe, our main concern was this fragmentalization of knowledge and about the bridging of the gap between science and culture. And I think today we had excellent discussions on this topic. Let me just ask you to summarize, so to say, each one of you, your views about what are the main barriers and how exactly to make this bridge between science and culture. So in the morning, I think John talked about the Anthropocene as a potential bridge, and Professor Fujita talked about the dialogue as a way to create some shared values. Later on in the afternoon, we had Professor Tosa and Professor Cho talking about art and how can we achieve this fusion by using art and fusion of art with technology. So there are various ideas which were discussed in individual sessions. So what I wanted to do is try to think overall what you heard not only in your session but from the other sessions, and reconsider again possible bridges between science and culture, having in mind in total all discussions. So let's start with you, John.
Thank you. I think one of the key things is the need to pluralize everything you said in the singular, basically. To pluralize sciences, cultures, or forms of cultural practice and scientific practice, and to pluralize bridges, and perhaps to go beyond bridges. If we're mapping the space in which science and culture need to cohabit and interact, then clearly there will be rivers to be crossed by bridges, but there might also be mountains to be crossed by passes, and there might be plains through which we will circulate with paths. I think that the metaphor of mapping a space is perhaps more helpful than the metaphor of bridging a gap in many respects. I tried to explain some of the reasons why I'm not convinced that there is precisely a gap. There are differences, disagreements, and misunderstandings, but there's also a lot of superposition and coexistence. Partly because, as we've been discussing, science is part of culture, including part of our public culture, and partly because no one is simply a scientist, and everyone has significant exposure to some aspects of science as a mode of thinking. So we're more in a hybrid space where the question is about, it's as much about how science as professional practice relates to science as part of shared public culture, as it is about the connection between science in general and something else. And perhaps one of the key issues to focus on, or two of the key issues to focus on, are first, how to ensure better connections between science as part of public culture and science as professional practice. And this is something that many scientific institutions are concerned about. It's very clear that science communication, to use the old-fashioned language, is not an adequate way of thinking about these issues. Not because communicating science is a bad thing, but because many of the processes that need to go on are not simply about communicating the results of science to non-scientists. They are about sharing science within different scientific communities. They are about educating in science, which means not just the results, but also the concepts, the methodologies, the worldviews. And they're about recognizing how science as a specific form of knowledge relates to other forms of knowledge, which are genuinely knowledge, but not produced through scientific protocols. I use the rather simple, oversimple comparison between magic and science this morning as part of my presentation, but this can be extended, of course, to other modes of knowledge. And thinking about some of the presentations that have been made since I spoke, the knowledge embedded in and embodied in craftsmanship, for instance, is knowledge. Not scientific knowledge, though science can be applied to it, but knowledge in a very powerful and very important sense. And similarly, the knowledge embedded in artistic practices is knowledge. You can do a science of it, even though it's not itself scientific, and the process of connection is about all of those connections. Finally, I think it is important also to keep in mind the notion of autonomy, which with respect to science has two meanings, both of which are important. And actually this won't be the final point, there will be a final point after the final point. Autonomy means first the kind of sociological point, the Luhmannian point, that complex societies need a certain degree of functional autonomy of the constituent parts in order to produce specialized knowledge that is valuable to the community as a whole. Therefore, you wouldn't want to erode or erase the differences between, say, science and culture. It is about a dialogue, not about simply abolishing the differences. And secondly, the autonomy of science means something else, not just functional, but epistemological. The idea that science can perform its valuable functions for humankind as a whole. Article 27, paragraph 2 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Every human being has the right to enjoy the benefit of scientific progress and its applications. To take that seriously as a human right, we actually want science which is autonomous in the sense protected against external pressures on its questions and on its answers. So we probably wouldn't want to go too far in terms of ignoring differences, and there are some gaps that are probably desirable, just so long as they can be navigated. And that leads me to the absolutely final point, which is that one of the important bridges is ethical or political, which are ultimately the same thing. They are about a set of questions that have to do with how a political community organizes itself. And those questions bring into play the question what image we have of science and how we choose collectively to organize science, or to enable science to be organized, as a social process producing social outcomes. Of course, science can also be viewed from a non-social perspective in terms simply of its content. But as everyone knows, science is not just the content of science. It's not just the established theorems that bear the name of some famous dead person. It's also the living process of producing not just the knowledge, but the conditions in which knowledge can be produced. And from that point of view, it is a political and ethical matter whether science exists at all. In Orwell's 1984, there's no science. There's technology, as O'Brien makes it very clear in the torture sequences of the novel. We have technology. When designing a helicopter, says O'Brien, it's very important that 2 plus 2 should make 4. But in general political terms, 2 plus 2 is equal to what the party says it's equal to. 3, 4, 5, we decide. It's not a fact that we need to subscribe to or recognize. It's a political choice to be made. So making political choices about science is very double-edged. But nonetheless, the very existence of science as science is a collective political choice. It's just that we don't always realize it. Perhaps if we realized it more explicitly, we will be better placed to deal with all the necessary pluralism, with this set of relationships and mapping the space within which science and culture coexist, talk to one another, and occasionally, inevitably, ignore one another. Thanks.
私は本日の、シンポジウムの他の先生方のプレゼンテーションとか聞いていて、2つ思ったんですが、一つは文化という概念といいますか、文化の意味の多様性みたいなのを強く感じました。文化の多様性というのはもう当然の前提ですけど、文化の意味の多様性ということですね。で、私自身はその文化というものを作り上げているものというのは、その具体的に表現されたものの背景にあるレイグルの言葉で言えばクンスト・ボレンというアート・ウィル、そういうものになりますし、西田喜太郎の言葉で言えば形なきものとか、あるいは無限に動くものという、そういう意味になるかと思いますが、そういうものを具体化するために、例えば詩を作ったり歌を作ったりとか、あるいは絵画を描いたりとか、今日ご紹介した長谷川東博のああいう少林寺というものの背景に、彼が経験したこの自然の荒涼としたありさまですね、そういうものを受け止めた自分の心の中の寂寥感みたいなものですね、そういうものを表現するという、そういう形の背後にあるものですね、そういうものを表現するのが文化だという理解をしてるんですけども、必ずしもそういう観点でなく、別の仕方で文化を理解するっていう、そういうことも他の先生方がされて、そういう意味で文化の意味の多様性というのを一つ感じました。あと一つ申し上げたいんですが、とりあえずちょっと。
It's not easy to translate, but basically, I think Professor Fujita wants to say that his impression from all discussions today was this diversity in the meanings of what is culture, or diversity of cultures themselves. もう一つ
もう一つはその科学と、文化の架橋を架けるっていうことですけども、もちろん今日お話しいただいたようなさまざまな形で、そのブリッジングというのを考えることができると思いますが、私自身は先ほどのクローリーさんのお話にそのエスカルなそういう視点という話も出てきましたけれども、私たちが 現在直面している文化と文化の対立とか、民族と民族の対立、あるいは宗教と宗教の対立っていう、そういう対立が深刻化しようとしているという、そういう現状の中でその対立をいかに克服していくのかという、そういう問題を考えることによって、初めてその文化とサイエンスの佳境というそういう問題も現実の問題として考えられるのではないかという、そういうふうに思っていますので、そういう根本にある問題ですね、そういうところからこの文化と科学の佳境という問題も考えていく必要があるのではないかという、そういうことを強く思ったというのは第2番目の点であります。
The second point that he would like to make is that in the present age where we see lots of confrontation between different cultures, between different religions or groups, he thinks that it's especially important to make bridges between science and culture, and the particular forms, the ways these bridges can be built are when different scientists try to, or different interested parties try to find solutions to overcome these confrontations.
Merci. Je tiens d'abord à remercier, à féliciter l'Université de Kyoto et l'Institut d'avoir mis sur pied ce projet qui est vraiment inédit, important, autour des études des Survivability Studies.
So I'd like first to thank and congratulate the University of Kyoto and particularly the Shishukan to have established such a program of survivability studies.
C'est vraiment une question essentielle pour notre futur.
It's an essential question for the future.
Et il me semble qu'il n'y a rien d'équivalent dans le monde universitaire mondial, et en cela, c'est vraiment.
And I am not aware of any similar initiative in the world at this point, and thus it is extremely important.
Alors, je me contenterai ici de souligner 2 points.
I will here express 2 points.
Le premier, c'est que, comme tout projet nouveau, il y a une effervescence intellectuelle, une effervescence de problèmes qui parfois engendre une certaine ambiguïté.
So, as any new project, there is a multiplication of diversification of objects, and this brings sometimes some ambiguity or problematic aspects.
Je prendrai qu'un seul exemple.
Only one example.
Tiré de la notion même de survivability.
Taken from, extracted directly from the very notion of survivability.
Voilà. Le préfixe sur.
The prefix sur in French or in English.
Et dans toute la tradition philosophique, un préfixe ambigu.
So in all the philosophical traditions, this is an ambiguous prefix.
Bon. Survivre, la survie, la survie, on peut penser que c'est la vie du surhomme.
So this is the life of the Superman? No, this is Overman.
Ouais, Overman, voilà. Superman or Overman. Les traducteurs de Nietzsche traduisent le surhomme de Nietzsche par
Overman.
Super and over, it's not the same.
Yes. So this is a problem of translation from the French and English about the Nietzsche's book, which was actually translated in English as the Overman, not the Superman.
Et donc, cette différence n'est pas encore claire.
But this difference is not clear. How do we understand the sur and survivability?
Le deuxième point,
second point,
c'est qu'il me semble qu'il ne suffit pas, pour élaborer ce type de recherche, il ne suffit pas d'organiser une pluridisciplinarité.
So to achieve survivability studies, it is not enough just to organize multidisciplinarity.
L'intérêt de la pluridisciplinarité, c'est que les savoirs au contact des uns des autres se modifient.
But the interest of multidisciplinarity is that the different knowledge or the different specialties, because they are in contact, they transform each other.
Sans nécessairement oublier leur spécificité.
Without forgetting their own specialty or specificity.
En cela, ce type de recherche est vraiment une question épistémologique avant d'être une question politique et morale.
As such, we start with the epistemological question rather than a moral or ethical or political question.
Et c'est la raison pour laquelle, j'imagine, l'Université de Kyoto a fondé un institut.
And this is why I imagine that the University of Kyoto created such a new institute.
Et mon message est simple.
My message is simple.
La diplomatie environnementale, les ministères de l'écologie, c'est bien, mais ce n'est pas suffisant. Il faut faire encore un effort du savoir.
So environmental diplomacy or creating governmental institutions like Ministry of Ecology, in French we have such a ministry, is not enough. We need something more.
Il faut faire cet effort
and this
intellectuel.
Is this effort of scientific knowledge, of epistemological knowledge.
Voilà.
In my understanding, science is a part of the culture. So both are kind of the complementary position with each other. But there is a certain gap between science and culture to be overcome. That is maybe the language, I mean the technical terms and so on, to be understood with each other. In my experience, I started this wood aging project in 1995 with different sectors such as the craftsmen for the restorations or researchers from art and history and science and technology. Every month took us around maybe 5 years and so on to understand with each other. Then we started to go forward in project together with. So that in a way, dialogue is conversation or communications like this symposium will be getting quite important to understand each other's. That's my experiences and impression of the symposium. This symposium should be continued in the future.
Probably my comment will be a little bit more specific about the cultural or historical heritages. In Japan, I don't know in the United States or other European country or some developing country too, but most of the cultural and historical heritage with physical form belongs to the religious institutions in Japan. And religion is, what is the nature of the human emotion is the religion is all about. In that term, applying directly the scientific knowledge or scientific technology to the cultural heritage, which belongs to the cultural and religious institution. That kind of emotional thing would be the most difficult, I would say, barrier or obstacle to overcome between the bridge or the bridge between science and culture, I think. And well, today's presentation on the third session was very, very fascinating for me, and because artificial intelligence, if they have a personality throughout the deep learning, AI could present some new types of religion. I don't know if it is good or not. It's really too early to judge it. But as far as artists are using the artificial intelligence as a tool, I think the artist will be quite similar to the conventional meaning of the artist. But if probably so, I think. So as far as if the artist or AI could have personality, or AI artist, I would say, could have personality or emotion, that would be the completely different. I would say the form of artist or the type of artist. So I think the religion will be the quite important factors to think about the culture and science in sometimes. Probably that's the kind of things I've changed from this to today's afternoon session. Thank you.
So my understanding is, for me, basically, I'm very interested about art and culture and science and technology combined together. How to do that? I am almost, 20 years thinking about it. And on the other hand, I understanding science and technology usually divide, divide, and integration. Make a model and then integration. And culture, art and culture, expression, okay? And also, what is new things? Science is found with something. Art and culture is create something, okay? I think maybe for my belief, my understanding, it can be very, very possible to the art and culture and the science connected by beauty. Because, remember that even mathematician, even scientists, interested about beauty. Oh, beauty is formula or something. I think that's why, beauty is one of the possibility of the connection, bridge of the, culture and science. That's all.
Okay, so my impression of the Symposium is about culture. And I think most people have forgot the most important culture here, the language. So today, I'm happy to see that we have a lot of language today, the Japanese, and French, and English, and so I'm a Chinese, so I would like to switch to Chinese from now on. Is there anybody who can translate? Oh, it's a joke. Well, but it did give me an impression that if we can develop a nice AI, so now we can translate using machine translation instantly and frequently. Now, I would like to give a few comments on my talk today. First, science and culture. I don't think they have a big gap. It may not be small, but it is not big. So I'm going to illustrate using two examples. One example from science to culture. So I'm not sure if you know the subculture of American called the techno. So it's a subculture of American, and it was inspired by Topler's book, The Third Generation, the Third Wave, from the information, the technology. And another example is origami. So the folding paper is an ancient culture of Japan, also in China, but I think Japan are more good at folding the papers. It provided many topics in mathematics, how to fold a paper so precisely and with no weight, and to give us the expected shape. It involves a lot of mathematics and algorithms. And now, I remember yesterday I read it from a newspaper. It says that some engineering from MIT, I'm not very sure, from MIT, they invented artificial muscle, which uses origami's theory to, this artificial muscle can lift weight 1,000 times heavier than its own weight. So it's another nice illustration of science inspired from culture. And my final comment is that there's a quick way to bridge science and culture to join Shishukan. So you can have a lot of chance. Thanks.
Many thanks to all our speakers for their very interesting insights. And I think there is not much time. We are already almost beyond schedule, but I will allow a few questions from the audience. So maybe Professor De Roche first.
Yeah, just concluding comments. I think that there is a gap in our modern education, and this gap I will express it from the perspective of the individual. This is a gap that I mentioned in the beginning, the gap between the development of rationality, the critical mind, etc., and the development of sensitivity. And sensitivity is the understanding of our own emotion, the understanding it can be developed through the training of the senses, through the practice of art, but it's also through the practice of more aesthetical experiences, like for example through art. And this is why I think this notion of beauty is extremely important. And this gap exists, and it is in a sense natural, and we need to make clear epistemological distinction. It is what was made by Dr. Crowley this morning, and this is at the beginning of science and the beginning of philosophy. But making a distinction is very important and good. But then when this distinction becomes a divide that cannot be bridged, then we have another problem. But I think that our age is that we have developed extraordinary logical, critical mind, but most of the time we are unaware of our own emotions. And this is what emerged, I think, around the discussion of the AI and what, again, John underlined. So here we have a potential danger, I would say, that having a feeling actually of disconnection, because as, again, John, as a good epistemologist to them, he described the science as science of, as a process of objectivation, taking a distance, which is very important. But when we take a distance from life, this can be somehow problematic. And this is what Henri is in Critic is saying. So on the contrary, culture as a know-how, and here I will include very much technology and technique as a praxis. And culture in the sense is a knowledge of life, and knowledge of life felt from within. And when we go to the deeper sense of this knowledge, then we may reach the point of religion. This religion as this deepest feeling of connection with other human beings and deepest feeling of connection with nature, for example. And this is maybe here that we may integrate or connect, and I will conclude very much too with the note mentioned by Professor Tosa, that this is here that the beauty may arise, and this can be also, as Professor Fujita mentioned, the pulsation of the life of our cultures and our very life of humanity. Yes, thank you very much for your attention.
Mine is also a comment, not a question. And to start, maybe you will feel that what I'm saying sounds a little bit parochial, but I hope you'll agree. The first element in human survivability is food. You're all there because you ate in the first place. And there is no education, no health, nothing without food first. And so this is probably the 4th time that I attend this. I've come every year ever since I came to Japan 4 years ago to this symposium. Very useful as always. Thank you for always inviting me. I learned so much when I come here, including from the speakers today. Because we discuss culture and science, I like the Japanese say, I mean, I should probably call it a proverb, hara ga hette wa ikusa ga dekinu, right? Unless you eat, there is nothing you can do. You must start by eating first. And there is something in Japan. I was really, really interested in listening to what Dr. Miyagi was saying. It was so wonderful. there is something beside that. You know that UNESCO designates what we call World Heritage, cultural heritage sites. Sometimes it's intangible. But in FAO, since 2002, we have systems that we call globally important agricultural heritage systems. These systems combine traditional cultural knowledge and science to lead to what we call sustainable food production. And these are not too many around the world. We have we have them in about 20, actually less than 20 countries, and Japan is one of those. And in Japan alone, Japan is the second, country that has more sites, second only to China. And so these sites are also extremely beautiful to see. And this is in addition to all the great contribution that we heard from Miyagi-san. If we could also in the future consider listening to those who create and manage these systems in Japan, because now we have a good 9 such sites recognized by FAO, which contribute to our food security. It will be also a good complement to our discussions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And this will be the last question. I'm sorry, the gentleman over there. Can you introduce yourself?
My name is Yanni Mikaluri. I'm coming from Australia, and I'm an artist and scientist together. So I'm working in art and science, and I have many to say. Sorry I was not here this morning. I could object more, but I will pose some questions to the panel. Very interesting panel. What if before we eat, we breathe? What if our air is clean? What if methodology is for science, mythology is for art? What if truth is for science, beauty is for art? What if both these are the same and one? What if instead of STEM education, we go for STEAM education, where A is for art? And finally, just an information, if you say that we don't need art because we are scientists, I will say that NASA, that has many scientists, they have artists inside them, their premises, that they name them, listen, visual strategists. This is an artist of the tomorrow. He's not an artist with a romantic idea of the art. He's a visual strategist of the religion of today and tomorrow, that it is, the name of this religion is science. Thank you.
Can you specify maybe one question, because you posed many questions?
This question is rhetorical question.
Okay.
I have a Greek background, so rhetorical question.
I see. So the rhetorical question means that...
But I think the panel can think about
maybe if someone from our panelists would like to respond somehow, very briefly.
Just one very brief response.
it will be a big error if we continue to divide this kind of specializations that they were created in the industrialization era. Remember of Leonardo, he was not an artist or an engineer, he was all together, homo universalis. We have to go back to the homo universalis again. If we continue to divide ourselves or to put
labels on our fronts, we will again continue about specializations, and specializations is déjà vu. Finish. Specialization is not anymore. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think everyone up here probably agrees with you on that. Just one small comment. I'm not sure that the business of science is truth.
So what is the business of science for you?
The business of science is the validation of knowledge. And truth is shorthand for that, but it's a rather misleading shorthand. The one area of what's often called science, or at least STEM, where the notion of truth really applies is mathematics. And it's arguable that mathematics is not really science. It's the precondition for science to be possible in many of its modern forms. But precisely because mathematics is about truth, it's not clear that mathematics is, in the ordinary sense of the word, science. Call me a Popperian by saying that, but I think Popper makes some very important and valid points. And once you recognize that the business of science isn't, in that sense, truth, it becomes much easier to bridge the gaps.
If there was another mathematician, Poincaré.
Okay, sorry, we don't have time. We don't have time. You can meet after this and continue the discussions. I'm really sorry, but because of time constraints, we have to close this discussion here. No, sorry. So let me again thank you, to thank all our guests, all our speakers, and please give them some applause.